The campaign promises of President Trump and the agenda of Republicans in Congress hang in the balance as the U.S. Senate nears an expected vote on the so-called Big Beautiful Bill. Senate Republicans are trying to usher through the tax cuts and spending plan on a party line vote, but several holdouts remain. Alexander Bolton, senior staff writer here at The Hill, joins us to discuss. Hey, Alex, so what's the latest over there? Does Senate Majority Leader Thune have the votes?
Yeah, Thune told reporters a little while ago that he believed he does have the votes to get this big, beautiful bill, as the Republicans call it, over the finish line. He secured a deal with Lisa Murkowski, basically two provisions in the bill to blunt the impact of Medicaid spending cuts and food assistance spending cuts, cuts to the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, blunt their impact on Murkowski's home state of Alaska. So that appears to have clinched the deal. Now, Republican staff is working on the finishing touches, trying to draft the legislation and make sure it passes muster with the Senate parliamentarian. The big problem over the last couple of days is that the parliamentarian knocked out these two critical provisions that were important to Alaska. She said that the parliamentarian said that they did not comply with the bird rule and could not be included in this reconciliation package to pass with a simple majority vote. So that had to all be reworked last night, and it went on through the night right up until now. And actually, as we speak at 11:30 in the morning here, the Democrats have challenged the provision to help Alaska by essentially reducing the SNAP cuts. And so the Democrats are, they've called a vote on a motion to strike that language. So they're trying to blow up this deal with Murkowski before this bill comes up for a final vote.
What's the justification of making a carve out just for one state like that? Is that just the sausage making of politics? And is there any chance that they could anger maybe the more conservative side of the Republican conference by cutting those deals with Murkowski?
Well, that's the problem when you create a special deal just for one state. Apparently, the parliamentarian did not like that, so they had to rework the bill. And as was just explained on the floor a little while ago, what they're doing is they're basically delaying the implementation of SNAP cuts for states that have the highest error rates in delivering benefits. So Alaska, as I just heard on the floor, it has the highest error rate of any state in the country. That's why Murkowski was so concerned. So this is going to be this is being crafted more broadly to affect the 10 states with the highest error rates to slow the potential SNAP cuts. And so that is being done to please the parliamentarian. They're broadening this provision out so it doesn't just affect Alaska, but it's kind of ironic here because the whole point of the SNAP funding cuts was to incentivize states with the highest rates of error in delivering benefits. Well, now they're going to shield those states from those cuts because otherwise Murkowski won't vote for the bill. So is this sausage making? Yes, it is.
What about the whole timeline that we're supposed to be on here? There's been all this talk that we got to get this to President Trump's desk before the July 4th holiday. President Trump was asked about that today, and he said, well, it's kind of tough to do that. Maybe somewhere around July 4th would be okay. Is there any notion that maybe, they take some more time to sort this out a little bit and don't feel like they're on that rush timeline that they have been previously talking about?
Well, what Trump said last week is that he said that the July 4th deadline, wasn't a be all end all. And then right after that, he posted something else on social media and said, we've got to get it done by July 4th. So, he turns on a dime on these types of things. So, he could very well, as we get closer to July 4th, he may wonder, where does that bill get to my desk now? I mean, he can be a little capricious, maybe the word is sometimes. But I think smartly, Trump is giving Congress a little bit more breathing room here because he knows that this Senate bill and the changes made on the Senate side are going to be a tough sell in the House. So this may not move through the House as quickly as initially anticipated, and partly because there's been a lot of bad publicity around this bill. You've had Republicans like Tom Tillis of North Carolina warning that this bill is going to devastate some states in terms of Medicaid cuts. So it could be tougher to, pass this bill through the House. Already we're seeing some pretty strong pushback from some House Republicans over the Medicaid cuts. They have a smaller majority than the Senate does. So I think, Trump is picking that up. And that's why I think he's taking his foot off the gas here a little bit. He knows he knows what is happening in Congress. He has his finger on the pulse here, which to a pretty amazing degree, for a president, at least compared to the previous president, who was certainly more hands off when it came to legislative affairs on Capitol Hill.
What's happening with the clean energy issue? There were a group of Republicans pushing to keep wind and solar energy tax credits. The question seems to be how quickly will they be phased out? What's the latest on that front?
That's kind of, right now, the latest iteration, that was reported is that the conservatives actually, got the energy, the renewable energy tax cuts, phased out more quickly. I mean, this has gone back and forth. The initial, version of the Senate legislation was going to, slow down the phase outs of some renewable energy or cleaner energy, tax breaks. Then the conservatives in the Senate, got upset about that, and then I think they accelerated the timeline for some of the phase outs again. And then you had some, Republicans like Murkowski and John Curtis of Utah arguing that no, we need to slow the phase out of these renewable energy tax credits. This has been an issue over the last 24 hours. It has been negotiated behind closed doors. We're not really sure where it stands because more of the focus has been on these Medicaid and SNAP provisions as they affect Alaska. But certainly, my expectation is that they have softened, the phase out of some of these renewable energy credits. But again, so much is happening so fast. We'll almost have to, see the bill pass before we realize everything that's in it.
On Medicaid more broadly, I know you talked about the impacts on Alaska and how that's trying to be worked through, but this is an issue that's kind of getting pulled from both sides. There's some Republicans that want to cut it more, others worry the cuts go too far. Broadly speaking, how do you think the pendulum is landing at the moment?
In terms of whether this bill passes
Well,
or what
just
exactly?
in terms of are they leaning more into the big cuts that the fiscal hawks want to see happen and that maybe the Freedom Caucus in the House would be more comfortable with once it comes back over? Or are they listening to the Josh Hawleys of the world, the Susan Collinses of the world that are really hesitant to make big cuts to the Medicaid program?
They're not going to make deeper spending cuts to this bill. I mean, the spending cuts to this bill are already barely palatable. I mean, if there's anything Washington hates to do, it's to cut spending, and that's true of Democrats and Republicans. I mean, the pushback that we're seeing in the House is people who are concerned about the Medicaid cuts, and I think what is really spooking Republicans are when senators, Republicans like Tom Tillis of North Carolina, he gets out there and says that the Medicaid cuts in this bill are going to be devastating to North Carolina and other states that expanded Medicaid under the Affordable Care Act. Keep in mind, 40 states expanded Medicaid under the ACA, under Obamacare. So, it has become a big part of it's become a big part of the healthcare system. There are many rural hospitals around the country that could go out of business. Yes, the Senate bill includes a $25 billion rural hospital relief fund, but that is probably not going to be enough to make up for the other cuts. So I think right now people saw, I mean, this whole controversy with Tillis. He's now, he got into a huge fight with Trump over the Medicaid cuts. He's now retiring. He doesn't want to run again. And he really, sounded the alarm on the political impact of these cuts. I'm hearing more from Republicans that they are worried about how this is going to play politically. So I do not think that the bigger cuts to Medicaid or bigger spending cuts are at all realistic in the House. In fact, the amendment that was being proposed by Rick Scott to cut an additional 313 billion in Medicaid, I'm not sure if it's even going to get a vote here in the Senate. I think it was, I think, slapped down pretty quickly in the Senate.
Last question, I'll let you get back to your reporting because I know you're super busy over there. But Elon Musk has been tweeting up a storm over this issue, promising primary challenges for any Republicans who support this bill. The House Freedom Caucus has tweeted against it as well. One member called it fiscally criminal. You talked about what is going to happen when this goes back over to the House and the possibility they may need more time to work through it. How serious do you think the concerns are from somebody like John Thune that what they actually get through the Senate is just going to be a super heavy lift over in the House where, as you mentioned, they have even smaller margins?
Yeah, but on the other hand, Trump has a pretty good track record of, twisting arms over in the House. And, There was skepticism whether the House Republicans could pass a budget resolution. They did. There was skepticism as to whether they could pass a government funding bill to avoid a government shutdown. They did. There was skepticism as to whether Speaker Mike Johnson could get the votes to be elected Speaker. He did. I mean, Donald Trump was a big part of the whip operation over there. So, yes, there's a lot of grumbling and complaining and kind of hand wringing on the House side right now before they even get the bill. But I think at least, in the Senate, or which I cover most closely, I think there's an expectation that once Trump starts, flexing his political muscle in the lower chamber, that they're going to fall into line pretty quickly. But, it's no guarantee. It's hard, this bill polling shows this bill is not very popular. So, there's going to be some drama in the next couple of days. So, tune in and keep watching.
It seems like it's been the strategy from House Speaker Mike Johnson is to keep the momentum going, and then when it gets to the end, he thinks that both he and President Trump will be able to apply the pressure to get those skeptical members of the House to join in. But as you said, we'll have to keep on following it. Thank you so much for your up-to-the-minute reporting. We'll continue to follow your work. Alexander Bolton, thanks so much.
Thank you.